Hello friends, hope you're doing good. So now we are going to discuss about the MCQs, very conceptual MCQs of nerve muscle physiology, one of the most important topics of physiology, right? Okay, I'll try to cover the related topics with the aid of these MCQs as well, right? So please concentrate and let us start. The first question says, the site where the propagated action potentials are generated in the neuron is cell body, axon hillock, dendrites or initial segment. Now this is a very tricky question. Some of the books earlier had some confusion, although the confusions are no more there. This is the diagram of a motor neuron, a simple neuron, right? In which this is the cell body, soma. What does cell body do? Cell body basically forms all the materials. It has Nissl granules, it has the metabolic center. So all the metabolites are done here, are formed here. This is axon initial segment, right? This is axon hillock. So now important thing here is, please try to concentrate here. Axon hillock is a part of, one question within this question is axon hillock a part of cell body or a part of axon? The answer is, it's the part of cell body. So axon hillock is a part of cell body. This is a very important point. Cell body of a neuron is known as soma. Initial segment of axon is a segment, the first segment of axon, right? It has, initial segment has very high concentration of sodium channels, okay? When initial segment of the axon has very high concentration of sodium channels, and actually it is required, the sodium channels are required for action potential. So this is the site of generation of action potential in a motor neuron, fine. So in a motor neuron, initial segment is the site of generation of action potential, fine. So there is no doubt about it. The answer here is D. Now, for example, if you say, if there is an MCQ, a tricky MCQ in which initial segment is not given, while the other options are there, cell body, axon hillock, dendrites or soma or something like that, then in such a case, what would be the answer? Then in such a case, axon hillock can be the answer, okay? But if initial segment is given in the option, it has to be the answer. Initial segment is the site of generation of action potential in the neuron, a motor neuron. Now let us talk of another type of neuron. But before that, let us see what are the parts of neurons and what are their use or characteristics. So cell body or soma, it contains nucleus, so all the DNA material it carries, and it forms multiple type of proteins which are required. It is the metabolic center. Nissl granules or Nissl bodies are present in the soma, and they are the rough endoplasmic reticulum of the neurons. So being rough endoplasmic reticulum, they are important for protein synthesis. Dendrites, as you know, they are the branches exiting out from the or attached to the soma, and they receive information. So important is they receive information, and they have dendritic spines in them which are knobby, right? What is axon hillock? Axon hillock is part of cell body. This is another, I already told you, this is a question. This is a part of cell body which is thickened and from which axon is attached, okay? Axon basically is, you can say, a type of dendrite, although it's different from dendrite. It is usually a thickened one, and it contains, it carries or transmit out the information from the neuron. What is initial segment? Initial segment is the part of axon, the initial part of axon where the action potentials are generated, and nerve endings are the site where the neurotransmitters are stored and released, right? So, here you can see this is the cell soma, these are all dendrites, okay. This is axon hillock as I already discussed, this is initial segment, right, and there is this axon which is going all the way, and ultimately the terminal buttons which basically carry the neurotransmitter, right, they are there, nerve endings are okay, fine. So, these are terminal buttons or nerve endings. Also shown here is the Schwann cells which form myelin sheath over the axon, right, and the points in which the myelin sheath is not there, they are known as nodes of Ranvier. Another question here is, in sensory neuron, in sensory nerves, the site of action potential, site of first action potential. Important question, this is the first node of Ranvier. This is another question, very important question, okay. Now we have learnt about the neuron, right. What are the other cells which are there in the CNS? Let us come over to that. Cells in the CNS and multiple questions along with those. So, what are the cells? There are neurons and there are supporting cells which are known as glial cells, right. So, these are the two major type of cells which are there in the CNS or the nervous system. I must say nervous system, not CNS, right. Okay. In neurons, we just the basic structure of neuron we just read. I'll tell you about the types of neurons also, but before that, let us first discuss the glial or supporting cells. Glial cells can be further divided into two types. Microglial cells and macroglial cells, okay. Macroglial cells, example is macroglial cell is, they basically helps in phagocyte, they are known as macroglia and they help in phagocytosis, okay. Microglial cells are important and the examples of microglial cells are astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, and also Schwann cells. Now, astrocytes, what does they do and what are the varieties? Astrocytes are, astro means star, they are star shaped cells and further are of two types. One is fibrous astrocyte, the other one is protoplasmic astrocyte. Now, these fibrous astrocytes, they are there in the white fibers or white matter of CNS, and obviously protoplasmic would be there in the grey matter, they are all supporting cells. Then oligodendrocytes, as you know, oligodendrocytes, they and Schwann cells, they help in myelination. Oligodendrocytes of CNS and Schwann cells of peripheral nervous system, myelin, okay. So, both these cells they help in myelination. So, okay. Now, another important MCQ, This is an MCQ, this is an MCQ. Astrocytes, the type of astrocytes are MCQ. Macroglia are phagocytic cells, this is an MCQ. Another MCQ is the ratio of Schwann cells to neuron, okay, Schwann cells to peripheral neuron myelination is 1:1. What does that mean? That simply means that if there is this one axon, one Schwann cell, one single Schwann cell is going to cover this, okay? It is going to cover this and have myelination, fine? So, one neuron, one Schwann cell. While oligodendrocyte, which is in CNS, this is important. It is one to many. One oligodendrocytes to many neurons. So, what it does is, if this is one cell, what it will do is, let us say this is one neuron, this is another neuron, this is another neuron which are going. So, one oligodendrocyte will give myelination to multiple neurons, somewhat like this. These are just schematic diagram just to show you, okay? Fine. And how does this help? CNS is, CNS is there in the skull or vertebral column. So, CNS is having a limited space. So, less number of oligodendrocytes will help in accommodation of more cells in this limited space. So, you can just remember it like this, right? Oligodendrocytes, CNS myelination, they help in CNS myelination, and the ratio of oligodendrocyte to neuron is 1:many. How many? Near about 20 to 30. Okay. So, one oligodendrocyte can give myelination to as large as 30 number of neurons. Okay. So, these are the glial cells. Let us now talk of the type of neuron cells there, because there are multiple questions again from them. Type of neurons. Neurons can be, first type of neuron is unipolar neuron. Okay. Now, unipolar neurons are found in invertebrates. Okay. Pseudo-unipolar, in humans. They are found in the dorsal root ganglia, okay, DRG. Bipolar in retina, in olfactory epithelium, in cochlea, sensory ganglia of the cochlea, okay, vestibular nerves, and multipolar are found in multiple places again. Most of the motor neurons, hippocampal pyramidal cells of hippocampus, okay. Purkinje cells of the cerebellum, again multipolar. So, unipolar is actually true unipolar, one cell body and only one projection. This is unipolar. Pseudo-unipolar actually is not a unipolar, it is a bipolar neuron in which the dendrites and axon, they almost stick together, get out of the cell and then divide into two. So, this is pseudo-unipolar. Bipolar is somewhat like this. One side axon, the other side dendrite, and multipolar, the example which I told you, somewhat like this. one axon and multiple dendrites. Fine. So these are the types of neurons. Questions have already been asked multiple number of times on these, and also multipolar, like pyramidal hippocampal cells are multipolar cells. There are multiple questions have come. Fine. Okay, now let us come over to the next question. Next question says, repolarization of action potential is due to, repolarization of nerve action potential is due to inward sodium current, inward potassium current, inward sodium current and inactivation of sodium channels, outward potassium current and inactivation of sodium channels. Okay. What happens in repolarization? So before coming on to the conclusion, let us now discuss the action potential of the nerve. Okay, so now first study the action potential. Okay, now this is the diagram of action potential, a pretty simple one, right? This is minus 70 RMP. So a nerve is at rest, it is at RMP at minus 70. It can vary in like for for muscles and few motor neurons, it can even be minus 90. So don't worry about it. Minus 70 RMP. Then this excitation is given to it from outside. There is local potential change which can be graded potential. But when this graded potential, once it reaches the threshold, this is the threshold level, which is usually for minus 70 RMP, it is usually minus 55. Then once it reaches this threshold level, there is opening up of fast voltage gated sodium channels. And this opening is almost like bombardment. All the channel openings are happening at the same time, right? All the sodium channels are opening at the same time. So there is a very steep, very sharp increase in the potential, and this potential ultimately crosses 0 and reaches up to plus 35. Then at this point of time, in fact just before this, it happens that there is closure of these fast sodium channels. The closure of sodium channels starts, and there is opening of potassium channels. So what we see here is that potassium channels are little slow to open, okay, and they are also slow to close. Sodium channels are fast to open and fast to close. So these are important points. Sodium channel is fast to open and fast to close, and potassium channel, they are slow to open and little slow to close. Both these channels are voltage gated. What are the voltage at which they are opened up? Sodium channels are opened at, or they open at, a voltage of minus 70 to plus 35, and as a matter of fact, potassium channels also, they open at a range of minus 70 to plus 35 millivolts. Now you can ask me that, sir, both these channels are opening at minus 70 and both these type of channels are opening up till plus 35. So there is ambiguity here, but no, there is no ambiguity. The only thing which I am saying here is that sodium channels are fast. So once it reaches like minus 55, all the sodium channels open up together, while potassium channels still take some time to open up. Okay. So depolarization is because of the simultaneous opening of the voltage gated sodium channels. Repolarization is because of the closure of those sodium channels and opening up of potassium channels, right? And hyperpolarization is because of the delayed opening, or you can say continuous opening of the potassium channels. They still remain open and the potassium reaches below resting level. Okay. Okay. So this is about the action potential of the neuron. Now let us see the question. Repolarization of nerve action potential is due to inward sodium current. Is the sodium current inward or outward? Important thing. If this is a cell, there is lot of which thing outside and which thing there is more of sodium inside or potassium inside. There is more of potassium inside. There is lot of potassium inside and very less sodium. Okay. While outside there is lot of sodium and very less of potassium. So, when a channel will open, is channel active or passive? Channel simply means something which is passive. Okay. So, if a channel is open, if the channel is, for example, for potassium, so its potassium channel is open, where will potassium go? From higher concentration to the lower concentration. So, potassium will go from inside to outside. If, for example, a sodium channel is open, now where will sodium go? From higher to lower concentration, that is influx will occur. Fine. So, always and always, whenever there is opening of the sodium channel, sodium will have influx, and whenever there is opening of the potassium channel, potassium is going to have efflux. Okay. Now, inward sodium current or inward sodium influx, you can say sodium influx, it will lead to depolarization, right? Because there is more of positive charge now which is coming inside. Sodium is coming in, positive charge is coming in, so there would be depolarization. It will lead to depolarization. Inward potassium current. Will potassium come in? No, not by the channels at least. Okay. So, potassium current will not happen inwards through the potassium channels. So, this is not a right situation. This will never happen. Inward potassium current and inactivation of the sodium channels. Again, because inward potassium current is not possible through channels, so this is a wrong situation. Let us check the last one. Outward potassium current and inactivation of sodium channels. This is right. The potassium current is still outwards. Absolutely. The potassium channels are open and therefore potassium efflux is happening. So, outside potassium current, outward potassium current and the sodium channels are already inactive. That is what we just read here, right? We just read that sodium channels are closed and potassium channels are open. Fine. Voltage, they are all voltage gated channels. Okay. Now, let us talk of another important concept, very important for MCQs, which is refractory period. So, what is refractory period? Refractory period refers to a period, it is a duration at which cell does not respond to subsequent stimulus. Okay, second stimulus means, so this is the period in which cell does not respond to the second stimulus. Now, there are two types of refractory period. One is absolute, the other one is relative. So, relative refractory period and absolute refractory period. Okay. So, what is absolute? Absolute is whatever amount of extra potential you give, there would be no second action potential which is going to come. So, the duration is from the firing level. So, from this level, okay. So, this is the time. So, all the refractory period will be referring to with respect to time. Okay. So, from this level, okay, from the firing level till repolarization is 1/3 complete. So, approximately till here. So, this is the time period in which even if you give additional, charge or additional potential, there will be no activity. Why is it so? Why is it absolute? Simply because almost all the sodium channels are open at this time, already open at this time. So action potential, the main, the reason for action potential is opening up of sodium channels, voltage gated sodium channels. If they are already open, giving more potential to them will not do anything good because they are already open. So therefore, this is absolute refractory period. Absolute refractory period. What is relative refractory period? Relative refractory period refers to a condition, a time interval in which if a supra threshold stimulus is given, then a second stimulus will happen. That means a second action potential can happen. So it is till here, till to the end of the action potential. So that means this is relative refractory period. Okay, fine. So a stronger than normal stimulus will lead to subsequent action potential. This is relative refractory period. Very important concept. Multiple times asked. The MCQ which can be asked in this is, I am just jotting down the MCQ now here. Question says, neuron is least excitable during. Question is, neuron is least excitable during. Tell me. Options are, first is repolarization, B is depolarization, C is hyperpolarization, and D is RMP, rest. So what is the answer? Answer has to be, yes, it has to be depolarization. It is not actually least, it is totally non-excitable during depolarization, because depolarization, the complete depolarization comes under absolute refractory period. Okay, fine. Now a couple of other questions from the action potential itself. What is going to happen if the blood levels of sodium, of potassium, they are increased? So if there is hyperkalemia, so in mild to moderate hyperkalemia, what happens is, what is going to happen in mild to moderate hyperkalemia? Tell me. See, let me just tell you how it happens. Let us say this is the cell, okay. Now, as I told you before also, there are lot of potassium ions on the inside. In red color, I am making potassium now, and in blue color, I am making sodium now. Okay. Outside, there are lot of sodium. Okay. In case there is moderate hyperkalemia, that means outside there are, so hyperkalemia refers to the potassium levels in the blood, and where is blood or plasma, blood plasma? It is outside the cell, so it is here. If there is moderate increase in the hyperkalemia, what is going to happen? There would be, it will lead to increased excitability. It will lead to increased excitability simply because there is increase in the RMP. Okay, because there would be increase in the RMP, simply because RMP is majorly because of the potassium channels, and because there is more of potassium inside and less of outside, so RMP is formed because of this. So if there is more of potassium outside also, the resting membrane potential is going to rise a little and excitability would be higher. Okay. Now second situation is, if there is mild to moderate, if there is not moderate but very severe hyperkalemia. Let us say this is the condition in which there is severe hyperkalemia. Now I am just depicting this on the diagram also. So initially what was there? Just I am making this is the normal action potential. Okay, here this is minus 55, this is minus 70, this is the normal one. Now in case there is mild to moderate hyperkalemia, what happens? The RMP, which was earlier minus 70, now the RMP is, it increases because of this hyperkalemia, it increases, the RMP increases. Okay, it's not minus 70 now, the new RMP is, let us say, minus 65 now. Okay, the firing potential is still minus 55. So for minus 65 to reach minus 55 is easier. So now this is minus 55. Therefore, the excitability is now high because the RMP has increased to minus 65. Okay. So this happens in mild to moderate hyperkalemia. If, let us say, there is a condition in which there is severe hyperkalemia, very, very high concentration of potassium, what is going to happen now? RMP may even reach minus 55. Okay, because RMP, as and when the hyperkalemia is happening, the potassium is increasing, there is increase in the RMP which is happening. So once it reaches minus 55, there would be action potential and it will be, the cell would be in depolarization state. Simple. And this depolarization state will lead to decreased excitability. Are you getting it? So just to summarize, if there is hyperkalemia in normal circumstance or mild to moderate hyperkalemia, because the RMP increases, so it is easier for the cell to reach the minus 55, that is the firing potential, okay, the threshold potential. So the excitability increases, okay. However, in case of severe hyperkalemia, there can be a situation in which the RMP has already reached minus 55, that is the threshold potential, and the cell is in depolarization. So excitability drastically reduces in such a case. Okay. This is more pronounced, these situations, they are more pronounced in cardiac muscles. So due to this increased excitability, such a situation can cause arrhythmias in heart. Okay. And due to severe hyperkalemia, this depolarization situation, it can basically also lead to decreased contractility of the heart, and systole will be very, very weak, and the heart will stop in diastole. This is important. The heart will stop in diastole. Okay. Fine. Now let us come over to the next question. The question says, now this is the question about skeletal muscles. Question says, identify the structure in the skeletal muscle. Now which structure are they asking? This is the structure which is being asked. This is the structure which is asked. Okay. Actin, myosin, desmin and titin. Any guesses? Yes, good, you know. So this is titin here. This is titin here, right? So this is this spring-like protein which is shown here is titin. What are the features of titin? And even before that, let us study a little about sarcomere, because there are numerous questions on this. Okay. So this is a sarcomere. What you see here is, this is the H zone. First see the Z line. Okay. So this is Z line here. here and here. This is Z line. With Z line are attached this titin, and titin attaches Z line with the M line. So, what does titin do? It attaches Z line with M line. This is another question which is asked for titin. Okay. Myosin filament is a thick filament which you know, and it's in between, and there are these thin actin filaments which are, you know, which are there on both the sides of myosin. Fine. So, this is the structure of the sarcomere, and H zone, this is the H zone, and H zone is basically between two thin, H zone is between two thin actins. You can just see here, H zone is between two thin actins. So, this is H zone, right, between two thin actins. What is I band? I band is, this is I band. So, I band is between two thick myosins. Right? I band is between two thick myosins. And what about A band? This is A band. It is due to, so it is overlying the myosin. So, this is due to myosin. A band is due to myosin. Fine. Okay. Few other points about titin. Titin 1, I told you, titin is a spring-like protein. It is, it joins Z line with M line. It is, another important point is, it is the largest known protein. It is the largest known protein in humans. Okay. This is another question which has come. Fine. Its molecular weight is approximately 3 million. 30 lakh is the molecular weight. Fine. And it helps in the muscle elasticity. It helps in the muscle elasticity. Okay. And helps in elasticity. However, it limits the stretch also. It's not like because of this titin, you can just cannot stretch muscle to a very long area. So, it limits the stretch. It helps in elasticity and limits the stretch. So, this is the work of titin. What are the contractile proteins? Actin and myosin are the contractile proteins. Okay. What are the regulatory proteins? Tropomyosin and troponin C. Good. Okay. What is Z line? Z line is basically which anchors the thin filaments and also is connected with titin for anchoring of myosin. Okay. Okay. Yeah. This is the same thing already typed for titin. It's the largest known protein, 3 million molecular weight. It's also called as muscle spring. It helps in elasticity. Okay. And it connects Z line with the M line. Fine. Important, another MCQ, clinical MCQ in this, titin mutation can also lead to dilated cardiomyopathy, okay, because it helps in elasticity. Titin helps in elasticity. What do you mean by elasticity? The recoil, okay. If you stretch it, it will recoil. The muscle if it stretches, recoiled. So, if titin is mutated, if muscle is stretched, it will not recoil. So, in heart, it will lead to dilated cardiomyopathy. Okay. So, this is a clinical important case for the titin mutation. Its mutation is in TTN gene. Okay. This is another question, a related one. You have to identify the protein in the arrow. So, this is the arrow which is shown here. So, what is this protein? This protein they are asking. And this is on the thin filament, shown in the thin filament. Okay. Is this titin? No. Actinin, tropomyosin, desmin. Anyone? What is this? Yes. You're right. This is tropomyosin. Okay. Now, tropomyosin and troponin C, they are nothing but regulatory proteins. I was just referring to these regulatory proteins. Fine. Let us now see other proteins here also. This is actin. Fine. This actin has myosin binding site. Actin has myosin binding site, and which is covered by this tropomyosin, which is covered by a strand-like protein which is known as tropomyosin. When the actin's active sites are covered by tropomyosin, when they are uncovered, actin can bind with the myosin, right? And the contraction will happen. The muscle contraction will happen. Okay. So, how troponin helps? Troponin C is basically, it is the attachment site for calcium. So, calcium attaches to troponin C. I'll just mention it here. So, regulatory proteins are two, troponin C and tropomyosin. What does troponin C? Calcium, it basically attaches to this troponin C. Okay. There is a conformational change in this, and this leads to the tropomyosin to slide off, and then the active sites on actin are exposed, and then there is this actin myosin interaction which happens. Fine. Okay. Other thing which you see here is, can you see, this is one layer and this is second layer. So, there are two layers of actin, and what type of actin is this? Two layers of F-actin. Another question, two layers of F-actin in thin filament. There is one tropomyosin strand which closes or which covers the active site. Fine. Okay. Fine. Next one, phase 2 of action potential shown is due to. Can you tell me what type of action potential is this? Is this a nerve action potential? No, this is not. Is this a cardiac action potential? Yes, this is a cardiac action potential. What type of cardiac action potential? The non-automatic or ventricular muscle cardiac action potential, right? So, you can see the membrane potential here. The membrane potential is approximately minus 90 at rest, and you can see the time here also. So, you can see approximately 200 millivolts of this prolonged curve here, right? Okay. Now, let us see it one by one. This is the action potential of the cardiac muscle, cardiac ventricular muscle, okay, ventricular as well as the, you can say, non-automatic, non-SA node, non-AV node muscle. Now, what happens at rest is, there is this sodium channel. Because of the excitation from the SA node, there occurs the opening up of sodium channels. The sodium channel opens, and when the sodium channel opens, there is this very steep, very sharp depolarization which is happening. Now, when the sodium channel, the sodium channel is very fast. So, it is very, very fast to open. So, within a millisecond, within few milliseconds actually, within 2-3 milliseconds, there is this sharp increase in the membrane potential, reaching up to nearly plus 15, plus 20. So once it reaches here, this sodium channel now closes. When the sodium channel closes, there is this sharp dip which occurs, right? This dip is followed by a plateau phase. This plateau phase is known as phase 2, and this is because of the opening up of calcium channels and the closing up of fast potassium channels. Okay. So when the fast potassium channels are, closing, when the fast potassium channels are closing, the potassium going out would be stayed. So potassium will not go out. So there would be no negativity. Okay. And when calcium channel open, few calcium is going to come in. So both the things are happening. Potassium are going out but slowly, and calcium is coming in again slowly. Because of these slow ionic changes, both in opposite direction, there is this plateau phase which occurs, which is known as phase 2, and it's majorly because of the calcium channel opening and fast potassium channel closing. Then after some time, after in fact a good amount of time, nearly about 200 milliseconds, calcium channels closes. Now when the calcium channel close, there will happen the decrease or the repolarization. This repolarization now would be because of the decrease in the calcium current or the calcium inflow and increase in the potassium efflux. Increase in the potassium efflux. This potassium efflux is now happening because of the slow type of potassium channels. Fine. And at rest, at last, it will reach the resting potential. Fine. This is just the basic outline of the cardiac muscle action potential. Okay. The non-automatic one. Okay. And in this, action potential of the ventricular muscles, because of this prolonged second phase, what happens? There is prolonged absolute refractory period. This whole is absolute refractory period. Okay. This prolonged absolute refractory period, it helps, and because of this, the muscles, the heart muscle, they cannot be tetanized. Because of this, the tetany in the heart muscle cannot happen. Okay. Another question, because of the prolonged second phase and prolonged absolute refractory period. Fine. Okay. Now, when we have talked about this, let us now talk about a few other properties of the cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is a striated muscle. It's it is striated, just like a skeletal muscle. It is involuntary. Although it is striated, it is involuntary. It has very extensive branching. These are all questions which have already come. Right? It has, very important question, it has intercalated disc. Intercalated discs. These intercalated discs which are present, they are present at, very important, they are present at Z line. Okay. And what is their function? Their function is cell to cell cohesion, not adhesion, it's cell to cell cohesion. So intercalated discs helps in cell to cell cohesion. Fine. And the gap junctions are also there. Gap junctions are also present at Z line. Fine. So intercalated disc and gap junctions are there in the cardiac muscles. Another couple of questions. Fine. Now, if this is the T tubule, T tubule is at the Z line. Another important question, T tubule is at Z line. In skeletal muscle, where is T tubule? In skeletal muscle, it is at AI junction, right? In skeletal muscle, T tubule is at AI junction. Another question. So, I am just discussing the concept point wise, and I am also jotting down all the important points which have already come as questions. Fine. This is this T tubule, and what happens? There is this sodium and calcium antiport. This is ECF, this is ICF, right? What happens? The action potential comes, and there is this DHP, dihydropyridine receptor. Okay, what is dihydropyridine receptor? Dihydropyridine receptor is nothing but a voltage gated calcium channel. It is voltage gated calcium channel. This is important. This, again a question multiple times asked. DHPR is nothing but a voltage gated calcium channel. Now, what it does is, this DHPR, whenever the action potential comes, this calcium channel opens. Due to this, there is influx of calcium here. Okay, from the ECF, the calcium comes inside. Now, when the calcium comes inside, the calcium will be all around. This is sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, in sarcoplasmic reticulum, what is there? Sarcoplasmic reticulum has another receptor which is known as ryanodine receptor. Okay, this ryanodine receptor, through this ryanodine receptor, calcium again comes out, right? Simple. Okay. So, there are two sources of calcium now. One is extracellular fluid through DHPR, calcium comes in from the extracellular fluid, and second is through the sarcoplasmic reticulum, from the sarcoplasmic reticulum through ryanodine receptor, calcium comes out. So, these are the two sources, main sources of the ryanodine receptor. This is known as L tubule also. So, this sarcoplasmic reticulum is known as L tubule, right? So, ryanodine receptor is present on L tubule through which calcium comes out. Okay, it has another channel which is known as SERCA. Okay, smooth endoplasmic reticulum calcium channel. So, what it does is, through SERCA, it goes in, calcium goes in. Fine. So, there are two opposite receptors. One is ryanodine receptor, through which when ryanodine attaches to it, the calcium comes out through and from SERCA, the calcium comes back or goes into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Fine. Okay. Now, another important point is, SERCA is inhibited by a protein known as phospholambin. It is inhibited by a protein known as phospholambin. This is a question multiple times which has been asked. So, if phospholambin is inhibited what is going to happen? If phospholamban is inhibited, what is going to happen? Circ activity will increase, right? Increase circ activity. And what is this circa doing? Circa is, taking back calcium into the endoplasmic reticulum. So, it is helping in relaxation. So, there would be increased rate of relaxation. Got it? Simple. Now, with this, I am just making another question, very important and a little difficult question. If there is increased sympathetic stimulation, what happens? There happens phosphorylation of phospholamban. Okay, which leads to inhibition or inactivation of phospholamban. Okay, what will it do? It will increase the circ activity. Okay, and this increase in the circ activity, this will lead to increase in the calcium in taking back of calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, right? And rapid accumulation of calcium by the sarcoplasmic reticulum. This will lead to, this rapid accumulation back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum will lead to increased rate of relaxation, right? This increased rate of relaxation is nothing but positive. Anyone? Please, you are right. This is known as positive lusitropic effect. Fine. So, rapid accumulation back into of calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum will lead to increased rate of relaxation, which is nothing but positive lusitropic effect. So, sympathetic activation, increased sympathetic stimulation will lead to positive lusitropic effect by this phenomenon. Okay. Another thing is, now when the calcium will be more in sarcoplasmic reticulum back, okay, then after some time this through ryanodin receptor, because there is more calcium now with the sarcoplasmic reticulum, ryanodin receptor will, when will it get activated? It will have increased calcium release. It will lead to increased force of contraction. And what is increased force of contraction known as? This is known as positive inotropy. So, therefore, these are two things which are happening. One is positive inotropy, positive lusitropic effect. So, these two can be explained through circa. Okay. Okay, and circa is controlled by phospholamban. So, phospholamban is a protein which helps in regulation of the cardiac contractility. Okay, this is another question. Phospholamban is a protein which helps in regulation of the cardiac contractility. Okay. Yeah. So, we have discussed multiple questions from the cardiac muscle here. So, we have discussed the cardiac action potential and the cardiac muscle contraction, multiple questions in that. Fine. Okay. So, next question is, which among the following statement is true with regards to excitation contraction coupling in smooth muscles? Okay. So, we have studied about the skeletal muscle contraction, we studied about the cardiac muscle contraction. Now, the question is about smooth muscle contraction. So, the question says, the options are, presence of troponin is essential, sustained contraction occurs with high calcium concentration, phosphorylation of actin is required for contraction, and presence of cellular calcium is essential to cause muscle contraction. Now, we will not be able to understand all these options until unless we have a thorough knowledge or understanding of the smooth muscle contraction. So we are going to first focus on that. Okay, so very one simple thing is that first thing is that for contraction in the smooth muscle also there has to have increase in the sarcoplasmic calcium, right? Increase in the calcium in the sarcoplasm, right? So how does it happen? Calcium can increase in the smooth muscles through multiple options. One is either from the sarcoplasmic reticulum stores, which can be like exited from through the ryanodine receptors, right? Second can be through the plasma channels. So the ECF calcium stores can come inside, or there can be combination of both. There is another third one, which is from the intracellular stores through IP3 calcium channel. So there are three important sources from which calcium can come into the smooth muscle. I am just repeating it again. So first source is from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is present inside the smooth muscle only through the ryanodine receptor. Second is from the outside, that is from the ECF coming into the into this cell. The third can be from the intracellular stores through inositol triphosphate calcium channels. Okay, so these are the three main sources. Most important source here is this one, influx of the voltage gated or ligand gated plasma membrane channels. So the main source is ECF. So the question is, most important source of calcium for smooth muscle is ECF. Okay. Okay. Now let us just see how the contraction, what is the series from excitation to contraction. So muscle is first of all excited, right? The action potential has come to the muscle. Now what happens? There is rise in the cytosolic calcium, mainly through these three things which I just told you. Most important is from the ECF. Okay. Now this calcium, it binds to calmodulin, and there is phosphorylation of myosin in thick filament. There is phosphorylation of myosin in thick filament after that. This leads to the binding of actin and myosin and formation of cross bridges, which ultimately leads to contraction. This is about the smooth muscle. How is it different from skeletal muscle? This is important. Now the first difference is this. In the skeletal muscle, the rise in the cytosolic calcium is only from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, ryanodine receptor is important there also. However, in skeletal muscle, so this is for skeletal muscle. This is for skeletal muscle, so and this is for smooth muscle. Fine. In skeletal muscle, this the source of calcium is sarcoplasmic reticulum only, and in smooth muscle the source can be multiple, can be three, but most of the calcium is coming from ECF. First point. Second is there are regulatory proteins troponin and tropomyosin which are there in the skeletal muscle. So their repositioning after attachment of this calcium, their repositioning happens, and active sites on the actin, they are opened up, they are bare now, and they then connect actin with the myosin. So there is uncovering of the binding sites, and actin and myosin are coming together. They are binding at the cross bridges, therefore leading to contraction in the skeletal muscle. However, here what happens? This calcium binds to calmodulin. There is no troponin here. There is calmodulin, and the phosphorylation of myosin thick filament occurs, which is leading to the binding of actin and myosin. So this is the main difference between smooth muscle contraction and skeletal muscle contraction. Okay. So ultimately, through phosphorylation of myosin, there is activation of Activation of myosin light chain kinase. Okay, fine. This phosphorylates the myosin light chain kinase. So, from activation of myosin light chain kinase, this happens, phosphorylation happens, fine. And this phosphorylation basically, it will activate the myosin ATPase, and this ATPase, this will lead to ATPase activation, and this ATPase activation will lead to the cross bridge formation and therefore leading to contraction. Okay. One other thing in smooth muscle which occurs is latch bridge mechanism. Okay. So, latch bridge mechanism also occurs, which leads to like decreased ATP usage. The important point in latch bridges, it leads to decreased ATP usage, and there is a slower actin myosin cross bridge cycling basically. Okay. So, the number of ATP used are less, and due to the latch bridge mechanism, the contraction as such is little slower, fine. Okay. So, the difference I have just again mentioned it here. In smooth and skeletal muscles, there are few things which are common, there are few things which are separate in smooth and skeletal muscle. So, the common things are contraction definitely will require ATP, it requires calcium also, and the excitation is through a nerve. So, first nerve will get excited and this nerve will transmit the excitation to the muscle, okay, and calcium is going to trigger this actin and myosin binding. What are different things? Different is, in a smooth muscle, there is calmodulin. In a skeletal muscle, there are tropominin and tropomyosin, okay. In a smooth muscle, there are cell to cell transmissions, and in skeletal muscle, there are these striations, and there are these cells are multinucleated. In smooth muscles, they are uninucleated. In a smooth muscle, they have smaller endoplasmic reticulum or sarcoplasmic reticulum. The cells are almost round, so cells are somewhat like this, okay. A skeletal muscle have like long filamentous cells which are there, and smooth muscles have multiple varicosities and junctions, diffuse junctions are there. A skeletal muscle have a proper neuromuscular junction, okay, and there is this actin myosin sliding filament which are there. So, there is a theory known as sliding filament theory in this. In smooth muscle cells, there is this latch bridge mechanism which is there, okay. So, there are few differences between smooth muscle and skeletal muscle, and few common things also. A very important point, and multiple MCQs can be asked from this chart only, okay. So, with this, through these small number of MCQs, I have covered more than 150 MCQs overall of nerve and muscle physiology, and also of the general physiology.